Now, another very important thing to decide on when you're playing slide is the string gauge and the height of the strings. Typically, you want to raise your action up a little bit more than normal, especially if you're used to using a low action, because if your action's too low when you play slide, the slide's going to bang into the frets. Derek Trucks is a guitar player who has developed such a sophisticated touch that he can have action that's very, very low and still play slide brilliantly and never bang into the frets and make unwanted noises using a low action. Many guitar players raise their action up a little bit, get a little more lift on the strings. On this type of guitar, it's very easy to do that just by raising the entire bridge right here like this. And then another thing is the string gauge. Most rock guitar players on an electric guitar will use 10s, and some guys use lighter strings than that. For playing slide, you probably wouldn't want to go lighter than a 10 because that's still relatively light, and the string is going to get depressed more easily. The heavier the string, the more stable it is, and then the more you can lean into the string with both hands. You could lean into it with the slide harder and pick harder with the right hand, and the string will stay there and it won't move. So as you experiment with playing slide and develop your technique, you're going to have to determine for yourself what works the best for you. Many guitar players, when they're first playing slide and first learning to do it, a good thing to do is to raise the action up to make it a little bit easier, and then as your technique becomes more developed, you can lower that action down. The advantage of having a lower action, an action that's similar to normal playing, is then you can very easily switch back and forth from playing slide to fretting normally using the same guitar as somebody like Warren Haynes does. And the action that you have and the type of string gauges that you use will accommodate both techniques. Another very important aspect of slide guitar is how to attack the string, whether you're going to use a pick or whether you're going to pick with your fingers, or if you're going to use hybrid picking, a combination of using the pick with the fingers. A great many slide guitar players prefer to pick with their fingers because you get a nice round sound when picking with the fingers. Also, you can mute the strings more easily, the individual strings, as you move across and get a more distinct sound. What I prefer to do when I play slide is I like to tuck the pick away so that I can use the pick, bring it back into play as need be. So I'll hold the pick like this in the joint of the index finger, and then I'm going to pick the strings with my other fingers. You can see I'm using the thumb to pick, but also using my ring finger. So if I'm going to alternate, the higher string, for me, is going to be the ring finger, and then the thumb's going to take the lower string. But with the pick tucked away like that, it's easy for me to bring the pick back out. Or use hybrid picking and pick the lower strings with the pick and the higher strings with a finger. Or switch to just using the pick for everything. One of the things you have to decide on when you're going to play slide is what type of slide you would like to use. So I have here a couple of different kinds of slides that are commonly used. Right here, this is an actual bottleneck that was cut, and that's what they did in the early days. they would cut off the neck of a bottle and then use that for a slide. And it's been sanded on the end so it's not sharp and it won't cut you. The one thing you have to be aware of if you use it for playing slide is you don't want this part, the lip, to be banging into the strings. Now, Duane Allman, he made popular the use of a glass bottle that was that came with a cold medication called coricidin, and that came in a glass bottle, and that's what he used for slide. And of course, because he was one of the greatest slide guitar players ever, that became a very popular thing to do. And it's been probably 35 years since you've been able to get that cold medication. So since then, there have been a variety of slide companies that have made replicas. So this here is a replica of a coricidin bottle, and that's what I like to use. It's not too heavy, it's light, and it's great to use with the lighter strings because the weight of the slide isn't that much. This slide is heavier, so it's tougher to use with light strings, easier to use with heavy gauge strings. This slide over here kind of splits the difference. You can see that it's also a bottle. It has a screw top and a lip. The nice thing about this particular one is it has no seam. This one has a seam, so while you're playing slide, you have to watch out for that. This one has no seam, so it really doesn't matter which way the slide is turned on your finger. The seam won't be banging into the strings. And then the last two slides are metal slides, and they're much thinner, as you can see, so they're really intended to be used on the pinky. They're much more comfortable on the pinky than to be used on the ring finger. The first one is chrome, and it's similar to the type of slide that Johnny Winter uses. When he was a kid, he got a piece of conduit pipe and cut it to the right length. And that's a great slide to wear on the pinky for a Johnny Winter kind of sound. And then the last one there is a brass slide, and brass produces kind of a darker sound, still a metallic sound, the sound of metal, but not as bright sounding as the chrome. So it's a good idea to experiment with these different types of materials for a slide. One that I don't have here is ceramic, and a ceramic slide is nice too. That has more of the sound, like the sound of glass. But generally speaking, the glass sound is a little smoother and warmer sounding, and then the metal is just as you would think. You've got a metal material against metal strings. It's a little harsher sounding, but you know, it has a little more high end, so that has its advantages too. So experiment with both and see which you prefer. All right, now let's get into the different tunings that are commonly used for slide guitar. And the first one I'd like to talk about is open E tuning. Now, open E tuning is a tuning wherein you tune the strings so it's akin to fretting a normal first position E cowboy chord. So the low 6th string stay E, but the A string now has to sound what would normally be fretted at the 2nd fret, which is a B note. So that's going to go up to B. And then the D string has to go up a whole step to E. So the bottom 3 strings are E, B, E, and then the G string, because normally you fret like that for an E open position chord, the G string's got to go up a half step to G sharp. And then the B string stays the same as normal, and the high E string stays the same as normal. So now if we strum across all the strings, you have an open E chord, E, B, E, G sharp, B, E. So an easy way to play major chords, because when you strum across all the strings, it makes the sound of a major chord, would be to just bar across all the strings to get another major chord. And you could do that with a normal fretting finger, or you could do that with the slide. So if I bar across all the strings at the 3rd fret, That's going to make a G major chord. The root note's determined by the note on the 6th string, or the high E string, because those strings are normal. They're both E's. And because we tuned our D string up a whole step, we also have a root note on the 4th string. 6th string, 4th string, 1st string. So that's G major. 5th fret would be A. 7th fret is B. 10th fret is D. And then here you have E again. So whatever the note is on the 6th or 1st string, and in this case on the 4th string as well, that's the name of the chord. So F, 1st fret, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp to B flat, B, C, C sharp, D flat, D, D sharp, B flat, E. And of course you could use the slide to play the chords. And then it repeats as you go higher. 15th fret is the same as the 3rd fret. That's a G. That's A. That's B. And that's D. And this slide doesn't reach across all the strings. I mean, you could, but it's not the most comfortable thing. So normally if you were to play a bar chord type thing with a slide, you either focus on the low strings or the higher strings. Now, normally a slide guitar player, when using an open tuning, will use a tuning that is the same as the key of the song. So if you're an open E, the song's in E. Derek Trucks is a slide guitar player who always plays in an open E tuning. So regardless of the key, that's the tuning he uses all the time. And in a similar way, Duane Allman would play slide in open E tuning all the time, but he would play in different keys. If he was playing in the key of C, like Done Somebody Wrong, or playing in the key of D, like Statesboro Blues, he was still in an open E tuning. When he played without a slide, however, he played in standard tuning, unlike Derek. So let's start from that perspective of being in the key of E with an open E tuning. So E is the 1 chord. The 4 chord is A. But here's another great way to play an A chord without barring. A nice thing to do is to put the middle finger on the 2nd fret of the A string and the index finger on the 1st fret of the G string. And this chord can function as the 4 chord in the key of E. So what this is really C sharp on the bottom. So this part of it is like A with a C sharp bass. But if you have the top 2 strings open, then you've got this. It's like a sus2 chord. So to get a normal A, we're going to add the 2nd fret of the B string. So it's easy to move back and forth from your E to your A, or your A sus2 with the C sharp in the bass. And a great 5 chord shape is almost the same thing as this, except we're going to move the 2nd fret note over to the D string. So this is B7, and then you have a sus4 on top, that E note. And that's just a commonly used chord because the fingering is so comfortable, so you're going to hear it. It accommodates the tuning. If you wanted to make it a true B7, just as we had put a note on the 2nd fret on top of the A chord, we're going to put one on top of the B, but now on the high E string. Like that. So you can go from E to A, sus2, to B7, add 4, back to E. All right, now let's talk about some of the scales and the typical scale patterns and shapes that you can use for soloing in open E. All right, a real typical way to solo in an open E tuning is to stick around 12th position and go back and forth primarily between 12th and 10th frets. So if we're descending, you would play 12 to 10 on each string all the way down like this. And then you can add 9 on the A string. If you're going up, now one thing that's very important is intonation. To be properly in tone, which means to play in tune, the slide should be directly over the fret when you pick a note, whether you're vibratoing or just picking the note without vibrato. And as you learn to play slide, you will learn to slide up and down into a fret position, going from below or from above. Likewise, from 1 fret below or 2 frets below. Or going down. Now, in the examples I'm playing here, the slide is pretty much parallel with the fret. But a lot of slide players, Derek Trucks is a good example and so is Son House, actually normally keep the slide on a bit of an angle. But regardless, the point at which the slide is making contact with the string is directly over the fret, whether the slide is parallel or on an angle. So you need to be very conscious of that. And what goes along with that, you don't want to press the slide down too hard. You don't want to depress the string and bang into the frets. It's not a good sound. You want the slide to float on the string. Many slide players like to mute behind the slide with their leftover fret hand fingers. And this eliminates unwanted sounds coming from this side. But if you mute properly with the pick hand, you'll be blocking all the strings you don't want to hear anyway. If you didn't block anything, it's going to get very noisy just from all the strings ringing into each other. So, for beginner players, it's a good idea to keep a trailing finger behind the slide, as well as doing the best you can with the pick hand to block unwanted strings. As your technique becomes more developed, you'll be able to play without blocking it all behind the slide, as Duane Allman did. Now let's add a few higher notes to this position. And a great place to do that is up to the 15th fret on the top 3 strings. So if we're coming out of this position, and we can keep going up up to the 17th fret. On the B string, we have another root note there, another E. And if you like, of course, you could continue to follow up E minor pentatonic. And then if you keep going, and then if you want to get the 6th in there, in the key of E, that would be a C sharp note. That would be on the 17th fret of the G string. One of the great advantages of an open tuning is you have so many open strings, actually all of them, that you could use for playing licks. They're all going to sound good because they're all chord tones in that key. So here are a couple scale patterns great for soloing, played down in the lower end of the neck using open strings. A great way to look at it that's very simple and easy to remember is you could play the 3rd fret and the 5th fret with the open string on every string, and it's going to sound fine. If you want, throw in the 7th fret on the high E string. Now to get a little more scale specific, if we were going to play E minor pentatonic in this position, you play Let's use a few more open strings this time. The open strings come in really handy for a lot of slide licks. And it's good to use different combinations. If you hear a root note that is slid into, it's nice to play that against the open string. And typical for this position is to pull back on the G string and get the A note here on the 1st fret of the G string. So not just the A note on the 5th fret of the D. So if you were ascending, descending, and a real typical lick to use that note All right, here's another scale. You could play E major pentatonic, and that would be like this. And a scale that goes great along with major pentatonic is major hexatonic. A 6-tone scale, pentatonic is 5-tone, hexatonic 6, is to add the 4th to this. So you would get this. There's your 4th. So we're adding an A note. And then what's neat, what happens there is you get into the whole form for the 4 chord. So this next example of slide solo, this is going to be played in the style of the slide guitar great, Elmore James. All right, so to play an Elmore James style, you just stay right in that 12th position where the E triad is. And what I'm doing, so I'm doing all upstrokes, picking the top 2 strings and vibratoing the whole time. So the first 3 beats, 1, 2, 3, beat 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this is the downbeat of the next bar. So they're on beat 4, pulled back, 12, 10, back to 12, and then 12 on top. And I'm using a pick if you did it with your fingers. Then I move down for the 4 chord. So you have your A major bar chord by laying across, and I'm picking the bottom 2 strings for that root 5th, root 6th, boogie, rock and roll kind of rhythm part. Reached up for the 12-12 in the middle of it. And then back over the 1, same figure that we started with. Then over the 5 chord, I play a melody to wrap up the 5 to the 4, back to the 1. So back on the 5, 4, same lick like you started with. So one more time. There's the 5, back on the 4. And then over the turnaround, so you slide up to 12 on the G string, and then slide back a little from the 12th to the 11th fret on the A string. And then that's slight movement between 12 and 11 on the B string. And then sliding up 11, 12 on the G. Same deal, that slight movement on the D string. So in this example, I'm only moving the slide between the 12th and the 11th fret. But you can slide back to the 10th fret if you prefer. It's for a wider sound. So that was a good example of playing slide in an Elmore James style over that kind of rhythm part. Now let's do another slide solo played over the same rhythm part. This is going to be more in the style of Johnny Winter. All right, so I started with by sliding up to the 3rd fret on the G and the B string, and I'm vibratoing and just picking back and forth between the 2 strings. So this is the 5th of E, and that's the flat 7th. And then I played a typical Johnny Winter. So right there, sliding up to the 5th fret of the B string, open B string, and that's a pull-off. One more time. Then right here, you can either pull straight back from the 3rd fret to the 1st fret, and then you're going to slide up the D string from the 3rd fret to the 4th fret. Open D, open high E. That D string is tuned up to E now, of course. So right there, instead of just going down from 3, I slid up to it, which Johnny Winter does a lot. So you hear that. That movement. then the second time, so we're starting with that quick pullback from 12 to 10 on the B string to 12 on the G. And that second time, instead of landing squarely on the 12th fret like we did the first time, we're going to slide up to it. Then goes to the 4 chord. That's up to the 15th fret. Back to 10, 12, 12. And then back on the B string, 12, 10. An intrinsic part of the sound of a slide lead is oftentimes if you're sliding up on one string, you're going to slide back on the next string. And that way you get the flowing sound. And the subtlety of moving in and out of those pitches is a big part of the sound. So when we come back from the 4 chord to the 1 chord, I played some more Johnny Winter style licks. So here I'm sliding up from the 3rd to the 5th fret on the B string, from D to E, and then I pick the open high E. So B string, E string, B string open. And there's all kinds of stuff you can do here that fits in. Like those quick pull-offs. So pull off, 3 open, and then slide back or a little up and back. Then over the 5 chord, I played a classic Muddy Water style lick. So what we're doing here, open low E, up to the 4th fret, open 5th string. Then I'm sliding up to the 7th fret on the A string. And the reason this sounds cool is right here, there's our 5 chord. So we're playing the 5th of B. Over B. But then, the root note that we're in, the key we're in E, that's the 5th of the 4 chord A. So what happens is, the beauty and the simplicity is, you can hear this note as being a whole step higher than the key we're in, but the reference has changed because we have a 5 chord that it's going over it. And then it turns into a great theme. It's just a very strong sounding. Because the second phrase answers the first phrase. They're in perfect balance with each other. So one more time, 5. So we did the same thing on the 5th string and the 6th string. Slide up to 5, open 3, 5, open 3. Now whether you're using a pick to play it or picking with your fingers, I'm blocking the other strings because I don't want them to ring. Those with the pick with the fingers. So these fingers are blocking all these higher strings, and then the edge of the palm is blocking the 6th string. So I just want to hear that 5th string, and I want it to be sound clear by itself. So another big part of the sound of playing slide is having control over when you want to hear one string, or if you want to hear more than one string and the strings ring into each other. So it sounds especially good to go back and forth. You get all the clarity of the single notes combined with that big full wide slide sound. Now let's play a similar solo where we're going to pick the tempo up and bring it up to sort of a moderate tempo along the lines of what you hear on classic blues tunes like Dust My Broom and Sweet Home Chicago. All right, so this is a real classic melody. And then over the 4 chord, I accented the minor third because that G natural is like the flat 7th of A. But it's really just to switch it up a little bit so it's not the exact same lick. So I use the beginning part to have a continuity into the 5 chord, and then went back to the same lick over the 4 chord. Remember, sliding in different directions as you go makes the riff sound interesting. As I mentioned before, Duane Allman, when he played slide, he always played an open E regardless of the key that the song was in. And Statesboro Blues is a song that they would play in the key of D. So if you were going to solo in D using an open E tuning, here's where the riffs would fall. All right, so using that closed position like we did for E, we're just going to move it down a whole step or 2 frets. So we're going to go between the 10th fret and the 8th fret. This is for D. So laying across the 10th fret, that's D. And you would go 10, 8, Then the additional higher notes, 13th fret on the top 3. And then you could go to the 15th for another root note, another D note, 13, 15, 17 is going up your D minor pentatonic scale, 20, 22. All right, now let me show you a slide solo. We're still in open E, but this is going to be in the key of D, and this is going to be over a track similar to Statesboro Blues, played in the style of Duane Allman. I started off in 10th position, so 10th fret, pull back on the high E string to 10th fret on the B string. Now you can see I'm finger picking, and after the initial, I play on the G string and the B string. So I'm kind of bouncing off the G string for each of the notes on the B string. But those G string notes are kind of ghosted, they're just sort of alluded to. So that second time, I'm going up to the high F note, minor third. So right here, slid up to 17, 13. So this is over the 5 chord. So those quick pullbacks, again, this is bouncing off that G string just for the rhythmic quality of it. Then up to 13. So we're vibratoing 13th fret on the G string and the B string. And then a pullback all the way down from 13 down to 8. And that's like that Elmore James lick. Let's continue our look at the playing of Duane Allman. We're going to talk about a great old blues tune called One Way Out. Duane Allman did some great slide playing on One Way Out, so this next example is going to be in that style. And this is another example of playing an open E tuning, but not in the key of E. This one's in the key of A. So let me first show you some scale positions to play in A, and then I'm going to play a solo over a One Way Out kind of a groove. So like our other scale positions, we're going to have the same kind of a span, but starting from the 5th fret, because that's our A chord, so we're going to go 5, 3 on all the strings. And then you can go 3 frets higher on the top 3 strings. go up to the 10th fret, there's your root note again. And like we had before, we're going to go straight up minor pentatonic, this time in the key of A. 8th fret, 10th fret, 12th fret, 15th fret, 17th fret. Now, this kind of links us to the exact same type of scale position, but played an octave higher. So we're going to go between the 17th and the 15th fret. And then 3 frets higher on the top 3 strings. All right, so I started by sliding. So then I switched to a real classic Duane Allman type of lick where you pull back repeatedly on the D string from the root note to the 7th with the 5th on the A string. And be sure when you're picking to make those notes jump out clearly and separate from each other. So then, that's over the 4 chord over D, 17, 15 or 16 to 17 on the B, up to 20 on the high A string. And then I went up what would be the 24th fret, which is pretty much right over the screw on the pickup. Good thing to aim for. And I did a repeated lick like that. So you pick a note and then pick it again and slide down from it. And then I went back to that for the break. So don't forget that contrary motion. Up, and back. That time up, 2 back, up, and then right on it. Let's take a look at one more Duane Allman style slide solo. This I'm going to play over a slow blues in the key of C, along the lines of what you hear Duane play on Derek and the Dominoes' Have You Ever Loved a Woman. Let's do the solo, and then I'll break it down for you. All right, we're in the key of C, so the 8th fret is the focus, 8, 6, 5, and And I started right on the 8th fret, picking up and vibratoing, pulling back, and then another one of those pulling back from the 8th to the 6th, the root to the flat 7th. Back to this. Going back and forth. Sliding up to 8, and then pulling back from 8 to 6 to 8. Up to 11 for the 5th, flat 7th. And then I shot up an octave higher. So this is 20th fret. And it's really difficult to stay properly intonated up here because of the angle you have to play at. And depending on the guitar you're using, on this guitar I'm banging into the horn a little bit. Even though this type of guitar has such great access to the higher frets, Dwayne liked using an SG, as does Derek Trucks, because you have so much access to the higher part of the neck. So 20th fret, this would be like 23rd. So this kind of lick that we've done before, up, back, up, back. Then we move back down. One of the truly great slide guitar masters of our generation, or the last couple generations, is Ry Cooder. And Ry Cooder has done a lot of great unaccompanied stuff on slide guitar, where he'll pick some low strings and allow them to ring like drones and then play a melody on top on the higher strings. And he's used this technique in some of his film soundtracks. He's done some incredible soundtracks. The soundtrack to Paris, Texas, that film is one of the best ones, very atmospheric. And a great example of playing in this style is the song Dark Was the Night from his first solo record. So you can pick your open low E drone, play a melody on top. You can use your open 5th string, which is the B. Another fun thing to do is to play a harmonic and slide up the string and get the harmonic to jump up. And this is something you hear Derek Trucks do all the time. And one of the really cool things about when Derek Trucks plays slide guitar in open E is he doesn't stay within the standard scale positions that you see a lot of slide players playing. He plays very freely up and down the neck. So this next example is going to be played over a track that's along the lines of the classic Allman Brothers tune Blue Sky. And I'm going to just play some melodic stuff in Derek's style, and you'll see how I move around the board in a little bit of a different way. All right, so I use one of these in-between positions here. I'm starting on the B string, but I'm using this E note over here. So if you look at this as a scale position, you could say you've got 9, 7, 9, 7, 8, and then 9, 7, 9, 7, 5. And then there's all these different ways to connect things. Because instead of playing over here, 9-7, you could play it 5-3 on the G string. So if we move down here, you'd have 4, 2, open, 5, 2, or same note here, 4th fret on the D, 2nd fret, open. And then that's the fun thing, is coming up with melodies and finding interesting ways to connect these scale positions. So look around, find the notes of the scale. Mostly that E hexatonic scale with the notes E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, back to E. But it's fun to play in those in-between positions. Because you find some new ideas and new melodies. Okay, the counterpart to open E tuning is open D tuning. It's the same tuning as E, but all the strings are a whole step lower. And in that way, all the chords and chord positions, scale positions, and riffs would be played exactly the same way as when you play an open E. So let's tune our guitar to open D. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to start by tuning the 6th string, the E, down a whole step to D. And then the 5th string and the 4th string stay the same. That's A and D. So the bottom three strings are D, A, D, and that's like a big D5 chord. And if you just looked at those strings, it's like a typical drop D tuning where the E goes down to D. But to continue to tune the whole guitar to open D, the G string is going to go down a half step to F sharp. The B string is going to go down to A, a whole step. And the high E, like the low E, goes down to D. So the strings individually now are D, A, D, F sharp, A, and D. Strum across. You got a big D chord, 3rd fret, F, 5th fret is G, 7th fret is A, that's the 5th, 10th fret is C, 12th fret is D again. One of the really great classic examples of playing slide and open D would be Johnny Winter's version of Highway 61, the Bob Dylan classic. So this next example is going to be played in that style. All right, so I started out going just to the root note at the 12th fret. Pulling back. Then I went up to the 15th fret. So I'm vibratoing while I'm picking back and forth on the G and the B string at the 15th fret. And I'm using the pick because Johnny Winter wears a thumb pick and he gets the sound of a pick attack. But then I bring some hybrid picking in and use my fingers because he does that as well. Using the thumb pick facilitates the use of picking with the fingers too. So pick with the finger, pick, finger, pick, pick, pick. Then I move down to the lower part of the neck. So that's top 2 strings. And sliding up the 5th fret on the B string, followed by I'm sliding up to the 7th fret, open, 3rd, 5th, open, 3rd, open. And then I went. So the first time, so I'm double picking. And then pulling off, 3rd fret of the B string. Slide up to the 5th, open. Slide up to the 5th and pull off. 5th, open, 3rd, pull back from 3rd, 3rd fret of the D string. And then I repeated it. After you pull off from here, you got to get into third fret of the B string, third fret of the G string really quickly. Or you could do a quick pull-off from the third fret as well. Back up to the 12th fret. All right, let's get into another great tuning for playing slide guitar, another open tuning, and this time we're going to do open A. Open A tuning is a tuning you hear used a lot by Johnny Winter, Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, and Lowell George from Little Feat. So to tune to open A, you're going to keep your sixth string the same, E, fifth string is A, but the D string goes up a whole step to E, and then the G string goes up a whole step to A, B string goes up a whole step to C sharp, and then the high E string stays the same. So the strings individually E, A, C sharp, and E, strum across, you have an A chord. Likewise, you can bar across all the strings to make bar chords and major chords. So if this is A, third fret would be C, because now we have a fifth string root. So it's akin to the normal fifth string root bar chords. We raised the D, G, and B string up a whole step, so instead of fretting a C chord like that, these notes now are found 2 frets lower because we raised the strings. C, that's a D, that's E, that's G, that's A. Some other great chord forms is for the 4 chord, for the D chord, you go 2 frets higher on the D string and 1 fret higher on the B string. So this is like a D sus2 or add 2 because of that high E note. And just like when we were in the key of E, we did the same thing, but we did it 1 pair of strings lower. So this is 1 pair of strings higher. And this is a very comfortable position, and that's why you hear it so commonly in blues and in country blues. If you wanted to make it like a true 4 chord, D with an F sharp bass, you'd add 2nd fret on the high E string. And if you're familiar with the sound of the Stones and Keith Richards, he uses the counterpart to open A, which is open G. Same tuning, everything down whole step, and he'll go back and forth between those 2 chord voicings. For the 5 chord, just like we had done with E where you jump the 1 string over, we're going to do the same thing. So for here, that's the 4 chord, 5 chord, move that middle finger over 1 string. So this is like E7. And you can put your open low E in there, and if you want, you can even add a B note there. So you'd have this. Back to the 4 chord, 1 chord. And now let's look at the typical scale positions for playing solos in open A. All right, we can use the same 12th, 10th fret concept like we used in open E for open A, except it's a little bit different. In E, our E string, that was a root note on top, but in A, that's the 5th. So you got 12th fret, 10th fret, 12th fret, 10th fret, 12th fret, 10th fret, 12th fret, 10th fret, but now the 9th fret's going to fall on the D string. And then you can go 12, 10 on the bottom 2 strings. On the way up. And then if we add higher notes, we do the same thing like we did before. We go 3 frets higher on the top 3 strings. And then if you want another root note, That's up on the 17th fret. And of course you can keep going. Now let's take a look at the lower scale that you can play using open strings and lower part of the neck. We can start with the open low E. It's that open A, that's our root note. So you could play open, 3, open 5th string, or you could play open, 3, 5. And like we had done with E, you can go 3, 5, 3, 5 across many of the strings. Or, so you're going open, 3, 5 on the G string, right over to the open high E string. 3rd fret, 5th fret. And some typical licks down here. And another great twist on the 4 chord is to play 3rd fret of the A string, so it looks like a normal C chord. And this is a chord John Lee Hooker used all the time. It's a D7th chord, but with the 7th in the bass. So it was very common to hear John Lee Hooker play things like And even though that's without a slide, you can hear how that tuning creates that sound. It's very similar, and slide players will use those same forms too. Open A is a great tuning for boogie-type blues, and it's great for playing with and without a slide. So this next example is just going to be played in kind of a John Lee Hooker boogie chillin' kind of a style, but it's also not far away from ZZ Top because they were very influenced by John Lee Hooker. So let's first play an example without the slide, and then we're going to play one with the slide over a boogie kind of a track. So what I was doing there is your typical you hit the open A on the downbeat, then everything else is an upstroke. And you can use the 3rd fret on the bottom through 2 strings for little accent bass notes. And then it's fun to do little rolling figures too. Right there, sliding up to the 3rd fret. On the top 2 strings. So even though I'm not using a slide, I'm trying to get a slide type effect with my fingers. And again, you can play around with those open strings versus the fretted notes on the 3rd and 5th fret. And then I threw in that 4 chord. All right, so I was using a lot of the same figures, but using the slide. Starting. Sliding up to the 5th fret. Then you pull, kind of slide down and pull up at the same time. 5th, 3rd, open. And then you can pick the open 2nd. And then you're going to pull back 3rd fret to the 1st fret, down to the 3rd fret. Then I did this repeated pull-off. So I'm pulling off 3rd fret of the G string to open to the 3rd fret of the D string. Sliding up to 7, open, 3, 5, 3, open, 3, open. Another one of these double pull-offs. And then I went up. So that's just like playing it here at the 3rd fret. And then that thing where you could jump back and forth between the 5th and the 3rd fret. Open A is a tuning you're going to hear on some of the great old classic blues tunes. One example is Sleepy John Estes Going to Brownsville. You also hear it used by Muddy Waters a lot. He uses it on Rollin' Tumblin' and Louisiana Blues. And then blues rock great Johnny Winter, he uses it on Meantown Blues. As you can see, I put the slide on my pinky, and the reason for that is the next example I'm going to play is going to be along the lines of things that Robert Johnson played, and he used the slide on his pinky, and Johnny Winter too. And then just as far as the chords and the tuning, it's along the lines of what Sleepy John Estes did using this tuning. So here's the example. 1, 2, 3, and all right, so one of the reasons to use the slide on the pinky is it opens up the availability of these three fingers. And this is a chord here. That you can hear in the playing of Robert Johnson. It's an A7 chord, and it's just a great sound. One of the great things about open A. So we have 7th fret of the G string, 6th fret of the B, 5th fret of the high E. And then we're going to switch to barring across the top 2 at the 5th. So you just take your middle finger off. Keep that bar there the whole time. Pull off from 5, 3, open. Or you could use the slide. And then I switch to this one. And this is another great chord in this tuning. So you have 3rd fret of the B, 5th fret of the high E. And then you take your ring finger off. And then in the example I played, I went up for the 4 chord, barring across the 5th fret, and then just fretting 3 frets higher on the high E string. And then this is kind of Johnny Winterish here. 5th fret of the D, 3rd fret, 5th fret of the A string, open D, 3rd fret, open. And I ended that by sliding up 1st to 3rd to 1st on the B string to the 3rd fret of the G. Pull off. And then I went to the 7th fret for the 5 chord. Played a similar lick. But another thing you can do, instead of just going straight to the 5 chord, you could do like we had done in our open E tuning. That's a 5 chord. So 5th string, 4th fret, open 4th, and then up to the 7th fret. And then to the 5th fret, that's the 4 chord. Another great open A tuning blues song is Rollin' and Tumblin', so this example is going to be played in that style. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right, in this example, I started So I'm sliding up after I pick the open high E, up to the 5th fret of the high E string. Then I just play a little blues lick. 5, 3, open, 3, open. And then slide up, 3, 1. And then so this is 3rd fret on the D and the G string. Pull off, slide up to it and pull up. And then 3rd fret on the A string. Second time I slid up to the 4 chord, so the whole 5th fret bar across. A lick similar to the other one. This is kind of the same lick from the 5th. 3, 1, 3, open, 3, 5, and then here, 12, 10, up to 12. Then I switch to octaves, so octaves are on the 5th string and the 3rd string, same note, open, 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, 10, 12. So up to 5, slide back and pull up. The counterpart to open A is open G. Just how open D was like open E, except everything was down a whole step, we do the same thing to get open G. But let's start again from standard tuning and move into open G from there. So the first thing to be aware of is in open G, the D string, the G string, and the B string don't change. They stay the same. 4th, 3rd, 2nd string, they don't change. They stay the notes D, G, and B. The low E is going to go down a whole step to D. The A string is going to go down a whole step to G. And the high E is going to go down a whole step to D. So now our tuning is D, G, D, G, B, D. And this tuning is used by Keith Richards all the time. This is his favorite tuning. Some of your favorite Stone songs are played in open G tuning and sometimes using the slide. And everything you did for open A is going to be the same for open G. All right, this next example is going to be played in the style of kind of a Muddy Waters meets Johnny Winter, and it gives me an opportunity to show you some open G style licks, fretted and also with the slide. And again, I'm using the slide on the pinky, so it keeps these 3 fingers open. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. right, in this example I started. So off that open A string, slide up, open, open. And then I did I'm using some finger picking here to get the high strings in there. You got the open A, and then the open high E string with the 3rd fret of the D. And then I switched to 3-4 on the A string. And you can get the B string in there too. 4 chord. So that's that great 5 chord lick. 4 chord. In this tuning, you have to do a big stretch to get this typical blues turnaround lick in. So I got 5th fret of the high E string the whole time, 3rd fret of the D, 2nd fret, 1st fret. So you really got to reach. And then I end open D string, 2nd fret of the G. As I mentioned, Keith Richards from the Stones loves open G tuning, and a real common thing he'll do is use a capo. If you capo up to the 4th fret, open G becomes open B. And curiously enough, this is the same thing Delta blues great Robert Johnson did on the original Crossroad Blues. So this next example is going to be played in Keith Richards style, and you hear him do this kind of thing using the open tuning with a slide and some incidental licks in there on songs like Happy and Tumblin' Dice. 1, 2, 3. All right, so it's just alternating between the 2nd fret, 2 frets higher than the capo, that is, on the D string, and 1 fret higher on the B. Slide up to the, I'm going to call it the 4th fret because that's the number of frets above the capo. 4th and 3rd. This would be the 4 chord. The 5 chords up here. Same kind of going back and forth. And then you have your little slide licks would be 5 frets and 3 frets above on the high E string, and then in the same position like you had without a capo. And then you move everything up an octave to play up here. So just like that was the open G, you're 2 whole steps higher just like you are with the capo. So now that we're in open G tuning, I'm going to lay down a real Rolling Stone style rhythm guitar part and do a slide part over it that's going to be in the style of Mick Taylor. Here we go. right, so I started that solo just by outlining the chords. I went right up to the root chord, so that's a high G, while the rhythm part was, I just played the straight chord on the top 3 strings with a vibrato, and I fingerpicked it. Thumbs picking the G string, and the middle and ring picked the B and high E. Went to the 5 chord, and then I played a high lick. So just like you have your root note over here, when you're in the key of G and you're in an open G tuning, here's your typical lick. This is the equivalent of that in an octave higher. Up to the 17th fret, pull back to 15, and then I went back chromatically 15, 14, 13. And you can see I'm picking with my fingers, so when I'm playing on the high E string, you can see I'm blocking all the other strings with the thumb going straight across. Then when I move over to the B string, I kind of create a bridge by blocking the other strings with the thumb and blocking the high E string with these fingers. And I use the same technique when I move over to the G string. So on the B here, slide it to the 12th fret, and then back from 12 to 10 on the G string. So there's that reverse motion, up, down. Each time pulling back 12, 10 on the G string, and then landing right on the 12th fret of the D string. You hear Dwayne Allman do this kind of sound all the time, that grace note pulling back. Went back to the chord. Second time. And the second time I played a lick down here. So, slide up to 5 and then pull off, and a 3 pull off. Then I wrapped up with a similar lick on top. So try all these open tunings for size, and try to discover as many of those interesting things about those tunings as you can. The things that those tunings facilitate and what makes them great for playing slide guitar. There are some players who use a whole variety of different tunings. One guy in particular is one of the best slide guitar players there is, Sonny Landreth. He uses all kinds of different tunings, some minor tunings, all kinds of different things to achieve the effect he's looking for. So try these different tunings and then experiment with some of your own. Now we're going to wrap up with a look at playing slide guitar in standard tuning, which is what I do all the time when I'm playing with Dickie Betts, because I'm always switching back and forth from playing slide guitar to playing normal guitar. And that's something that Warren Haynes does all the time as well, as does Gary Rossington in Leonard Skinner. And the standard tuning is really great for slide, and one of the things that you have to do when you play in standard tuning is to try to find ways to emulate an open tuning with the standard tuning. So let's first get into some slide scales that you would use playing in standard tuning. All right, let's talk about some scale positions for playing in the key of E. So of course all these positions are going to be the same as normal guitar playing because we're in standard tuning. So the objective is to play licks that use those open strings the same way you would if you were playing in open E tuning. So you could do that. And it takes a light touch to play down in that first position and get a clean sound. If we move up, so there I'm getting the major third in there. It's just like minor pentatonic, but that sweet sound in the major third. If we play major pentatonic down in first position, or you could play a G sharp here. Now let's take that same open position stuff and move it up an octave. If you want to hint at that major third, standard tuning is actually very close to open G tuning because the D, G, and B strings are the same in both tunings. So just how in open G you take advantage of the triad shape that's here with those three strings, you can do the same thing in standard tuning in whatever key you're playing in. So if we were playing in the key of E, you'd find that triad right here, 9th fret on the D, G, and B string. So if you were to play a scale that emulates that slide scale in standard tuning, it would sound like this. So what you should try to do is utilize the same techniques of sliding up on one string and back on another. So that was E. If you were to do A, that would be up here. And if you move that down an octave, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but you can do it. Or you can move it over here. And then gets moved over there. So you can say I have to move the slide You could angle the slide. As some slide guitar players like to do. And of course, you can use G because you've got those open strings just like you do in open G tuning. And now I'm going to play a slide solo in standard tuning, and this is going to be in the style of the legendary slide player Robert Nighthawk. So I started right on the root note. And part of the secret is to try to play solid melodies. So that's right in the rhythm of the triplet. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So pulled back 12. You can either pull back all the way to 10 or kind of halfway. Again, part of the beauty of slide is you have those increments. Those little quarter tones because you're not tied down to the sound of an actual pitch from the frets. It could be any gradation and point in between two half steps. Played basically the same lick twice. And that's nice to 12, 11, 12, and then go down to swoop back up to 9. And keep in mind you want to have those strings all sound individually. You don't want them ringing into each other. So you want to make sure you mute properly. On the 4 chord, so I went up to 15th fret on the high string, pull back to 10, 15, 10, and then a quick pull back 12, 10. Then on the 12th fret, that G, that's the dominant 7th of the 4 chord A. Then I played a lick just like I started with. That's a real Robert Nighthawk thing to do, to repeatedly pick notes. And play the same figure over and over again. Muddy Waters did a very similar thing when he played slide too. And then on the 5 chord, so here's your 5 note, the B note. So now I'm really playing on the 5 chord with B minor pentatonic, those are the notes. So 12th fret on the B string, 10, 12, 14 on the high E string. Twelve, 10, 12, 14, 12, 10, 12. And you could bring in the sound of the major third on the 5 chord. 11th fret of the high E string, that's a D sharp over B. Back to the 4 chord. And then play the root again over the 4 chord. So again, brought that melody back in so you can hear the thematic quality. And then wrap up the phrase by clearly outlining the 5 chord. 9 on the B string, pull back on the G, and 9 on the D. There's your B root note.